I think the Premier League is by far the best league.
Which is, in my opinion, the last probably 5-6 years is the best league in the world.
That is why the Premier League is the best league in the world.
Hans, are we the baddies?
Over the past week or so, we've seen all but one of the English clubs crash out of their respective European competition. West Ham won't be winning successive European trophies after losing to undefeated Bayer Leverkusen, Liverpool got knocked out by Atalanta, City lost on penalties to Champions League royalty Real Madrid, and Arsenal lost to Bayern, but only did so on purpose to make sure that the Premier League doesn't get an extra Champions League spot, so Tottenham would miss out. So it was on purpose. We lost on purpose. So naturally, with everyone out besides Aston Villa and the inevitable Unai Emery potentially winning more European silverware, the discussion about whether or not Premier League clubs are the actual farmers was brought up. Now we'll split this discussion into two parts, one supporting the English clubs and the other going against it, and we'll start with the parts that are supporting it. Now I don't want this to be me protecting the English league, alright? I'm American, I hate the British. How's that tea over there, guys? Oh yeah, we dumped it into the harbor, that's right, bozos, USA. However, one thing that I hate more is when someone is incredibly biased and has their own head up their ass, so like most of football Twitter. So let's start with the undeniable facts. The first being that the Premier League has more cup competitions and therefore potentially more games than the other top leagues. Now every top 5 league and virtually every league around the world has 2 competitions. The first being the domestic league and season, where you play everyone twice, home and away, unless you play in one of those weird breakaway leagues, and the other is the domestic cup competition. The Premier League has the FA Cup, La Liga has the Copa del Rey, the Bundesliga has the DFB Pokal, you get the idea. But what sets the Premier League apart is that they have an additional cup competition, the Carabao Cup. No other top 5 league has this. The closest you get is the Serie A and La Liga, where the top 2 clubs in the league and the 2 finalists from the cup competition play in a small 4-club tournament. This would be the Supercopa and the Super Cup in Italy and in Spain, respectively. Although this was a change made in recent seasons, as it used to be just a one-off match between 2 clubs, but the league's got super money hungry and everyone hates it, including the club who was in it, but whatever. The other 2 leagues, the Bundesliga and League One, only have something like the Community Shield, a single one-off match between the league winner and the domestic cup winner, and this means less matches and less chance for injury. Now in the Carabao Cup, you'll typically see a lot of rotation, at least from the top clubs. Arsenal, for example, only played about 5 or 6 starters in their 2 matches in the competition. It's worth noting, however, that more starters came into play about the last 30 minutes of the match, and I understand that 30 minutes is not the same as a full 90, but with how injuries can randomly occur at any given time, it puts the starters in needless games with very little upside. Chelsea, for example, went all the way to the final, playing starters along the way, was forced into extra time, and lost anyway, leaving with tired players and no silverware. Liverpool didn't get away scot-free either, because even though they won the cup, it's fairly meaningless, and they lost a squad player in Gravenberch for a month. It's no wonder why this competition is seen as unimportant to the top English clubs, but even though some clubs try their best to rest their starters for it, injuries can still occur, and players could potentially get more fatigued than they should. Now, the other fact is that the Premier League's winter break is a little bit different than the other leagues. Or at least was different, because they're scrapping it after this season, because why? In the other top leagues, there is a distinct winter break where players don't play any matches, league or domestic cup, for a set number of days. The Liga has the shortest break with at least 12 days, while German clubs get at least 22 days off. Bayern even scheduled a friendly to get their players' match fitness up. Now, English clubs do, or I guess did, get a break, but that's just from the league competition. Clubs that were still in the other cup competitions had to play those matches, so while a club like Arsenal had 12 days between games, Liverpool only had 10. And I understand that a difference of 2 days may not seem like a lot, but for one thing, any additional rest during the season is extremely important, whether that's for a player to recuperate or for the club to try to get players back from injury. And when you compare the rest days of some of the leagues to the English clubs, those extra days will be seen as vital. Now, for these last 2 points, even though they are in support of the English clubs, they can be a little bit more debated. The first being that the Premier League is the most physical and intense league in the world. You can make the argument that the Prem is indeed the most intense and physical. As compared to the other top 5 leagues, they average a higher sprint velocity, more sprints in general, and a higher average sprint distance as well. Some former managers and players also note the higher intensity, with Felipe Anderson being quoted as saying, "It's a big difference. I felt it in my first 10 games that I couldn't play more than 70 minutes because of the intensity." Maurizio Sarri also chimed in saying that the quality of the running in the Premier League is a lot higher than the Serie A. However, as I said before, all of this can be debated. When looking at the average number of sprints and sprint distances between clubs in the Champions League in 2020, you can see that only one English club is in the top 5 for intensity. Pep Guardiola has also gone on record to say, "I hear a lot of times about the intensity in the Premier League when none of you have been in La Liga or the Bundesliga to know how intense it is." In truth, it's difficult to compare the intensity of one league to another, just like how it's impossible to determine the difference in quality of mid-table clubs in one league to another. We often hear that mid-table clubs in the Premier League could easily beat mid-table clubs or even top 4 clubs in other leagues. Remember when this was said about Brighton?
Yeah, but I think Brighton would win Serie A.
Do you think?
I think they'd contend.
They'd definitely be in the top 4, wouldn't they?
Hot take after hot take today.
I don't think that's that hot a take.
Well, I love it.
Now, insane prediction aside, you could potentially argue that the Premier League has overall more quality than other leagues, the main reason being money. The Prem is without a doubt the richest and most powerful league, and it's not even close. The revenue that the Premier League brings in is almost double the amount of the Bundesliga, who's in second. The average wage bill for the Prem is double the amount of the next closest league. Luton Town has a higher wage bill than half of La Liga, by the way. And the prize money per position is completely outlandish. Southampton were earning 40 million more than Barcelona, even though they finished in 20th. With all this crazy money going around, that means even lower table clubs have lots of spending power and the ability to buy great talent. And that's what's been shown with teams like Brighton and Brentford. However, having money does not mean that you will always be making the right decision, as Everton have showed us time and time and time and time and time again. So does this mean that every English club is a heavy hitter? No, of course not. But what it does mean is that any Premier League club could potentially stumble upon 1 or 2 good signings and then become a sneaky difficult opponent. And so because of that, if an English club has to go play away to that sneaky difficult opponent, they may not be able to rest all of their players that they wanted for their Champions League match on Tuesday or Wednesday. So with everything I just said, you might think that I'm suggesting English clubs aren't farmers at all. That's where you're wrong, kiddo. Historically speaking, English clubs are not good in European competitions, contrary to what everyone thinks of them, especially against Spanish opposition. In the past 15 seasons, English clubs have only won the Champions League a total of 4 times. The top 3 most winningest clubs in Champions League history are not from England, and only one English club has made the final more than 5 times. In fact, the most dominant run in Champions League history doesn't belong to the Premier League or even La Liga. It actually belongs to the Serie A. During the 1980s and 90s, Serie A was the most intense, popular, and dominant league, and it was shown based on the talent the clubs had and the results around Europe. From 1983 to 1998, a Serie A club made the Champions League final 12 out of these 16 seasons, with them also making 7 straight finals from 1992 to 1998. It's also important to note that 4 different Italian clubs made the final in this time frame, rather than just 1 or 2 of them repeatedly making the final, like Real Madrid and Barcelona in Spain. So which side of the argument should you be taking? Is the Premier League an actual farmers league, or is this whole thing being blown out of proportion? Well, it's a fairly disappointing answer, honestly, because it's a combination of the two. As I just talked about, the Premier League has had some trouble in Europe, especially against Spanish opposition. But that trend has been changing in recent years. I said that in the past 15 seasons, only 4 English clubs have won the Champions League, but 3 of those winners have been in the past 5 years. And in the past 6 finals of the Champions League, 5 of them included an English club. Even though English clubs are 3rd on the list for most Champions League finals made, no other country has had a larger variety of clubs win the competition, with 6 different clubs lifting the trophy. While they're still a long way from the Serie A dominance during the 1980s and 90s, the Premier League is making a great case for becoming the best league. However, just because the Premier League as a whole is making progress in Europe, that doesn't mean that some clubs can't have an off season or be historically bad and bottle it. Arsenal, for example, are a pretty historic and world-renowned club, but they are notoriously bad in Europe, never having won a single piece of silverware while they were there. Even though Manchester City have won 5 out of the past 6 Premier League titles, potentially winning 6 out of the past 7, they've translated that to only 1 single Champions League trophy. You can also look at clubs within individual seasons, like this year, for example. Even though Liverpool are typically a great European side, they lost to Atalanta in only the quarterfinals of the Europa League. West Ham have been slowly imploding the past few months and were fairly easily dispatched by Bayer Leverkusen. United got grouped, Newcastle got grouped, and Brighton were completely trashed by Roma in the round of 16. All of these results could be from playing a couple more matches, having more injuries, or it can come from not respecting your opponent, tactical deficiencies, and just not having the know-how to compete at this stage. But most likely, like I said, it's a combination of these things. So on one hand, yes, even though things are indeed improving for the Premier League in Europe, you could argue that the league is slightly more intense and perhaps a little harder than other leagues, there can also be instances like this season, when English clubs repeat their cursed history, act like farmers and completely bottle it, or just shit the bed entirely. So that is going to do it for this video. Be sure to let me know what you guys think down below. Again, like I said, I do think it's a combination. It's probably not one or the other, as boring as that is, because it would have been good clickbait and good viewing, honestly. But like I said, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Peace.